Welcome to the Aviation Podcast here on Airliners Live. My name is Andy. I'll be your host for today. Today we've got a very special guest on the first ever edition of the podcast here in the new Airliners Live studio as well. The guest today is a good friend of the channel. If you've been watching our live streams, you probably know him from here and there, and as well as the Pilot Explained series on the Airliners Live and Airliners Lounge channel as well. We'll talk all about that and more. Bit about planes, bit about bikes as well. The guest is a former British freestyle BMX champion, as well as a current Airbus commercial airline pilot as well for an airline here at Manchester. We've got Captain Mark Langston.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, nice to be here, Andy.
Yeah, good. So, Bikes. What came first, the bikes or the planes?
Probably the planes.
Yeah.
When I was little, my mum used to take me up to Heathrow Airport.
Yeah.
And this is back in the 70s now, where you had proper planes, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I was more interested, on the top, I think it was the top of Terminal 1, there was a play area for kids.
All right.
And they had this climbing frame of these, like, I don't know what shape they were, but they were the red and yellow, like hexagonal boxes with holes cut in. I just love climbing in and out of them, you know. Oh yeah, occasionally have a look at a plane and then, but I really loved me planes back then, and I was more interested in the climbing frame. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
But as the years went on, the love for the planes was still there. When I was about 13, a good friend of mine from school took me down the local skate park, and I had a rally grifter back then. It wasn't built for skate parks, and I was watching, all these great big bowls and half pipes and everything, made of concrete. It was one of the first solid surf skate parks. I absolutely love this. This is great. And started riding my grifter down there and started learning some tricks, and then I got my first BMX. And it went from there. And, that was part of my downfall, really, because all I wanted to do was ride my BMX. I wasn't interested in school. It was boring as hell. I wasn't interested. And the teachers going, oh, well, his ideas are good, but he's just doing the bare minimum to get by. And I don't care, I just want to ride my BMX. That's all I want to do. And started to learn tricks. Left school, got an apprenticeship, still wanted to ride my BMX all the time. And that's all I did, ride my BMX, go down the pub with my mates. And then I had a bad crash when I was about 18. Concrete ramp at the skate park, and snapped my leg. 3 operations in the end to rebuild me. 6 months off work, that wasn't much fun. And as soon as I could get back on the bike, I was back on the bike. And after that I started doing competitions, and back then in the early 90s BMX was dead. And there weren't many people riding competitions, which was quite good because I was never really that good. But because I was doing all the competitions, every one I could get to I went to, and if you won you got 20 points, if you came second you got 19, and then third you got 18, and I went every contest and I racked up enough points to take the title for a year, and that was in like the expert class I think it was, and then I moved up to what used to be called master class I think it was. I was riding ramps as well, but I was absolutely dire on ramps, but because I was going to every one I took the title for the year. I was never a ramp rider, but anyway in the last year I just entered the flatland and took the title for the year for that. And then that was that, that was it. I still ride today.
So that was the 90s. What got in the way to prevent you from carrying on with that?
Well, I was never really that good. Some of my mates were much, much better than me. They're doing all the big jumps and that. My bottle had gone a little bit and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. Yeah. And I was getting quite annoyed because I wasn't getting as good as I wanted, and I just sort of took a break from it. And from then I started to, when I was about 21, I had my first flying lesson, and then started to learn to fly while I was working, and worked my way up from there.
So what got you into that flying lesson then? What sparked that?
Well, my family, my mum's side of the family's from South Shields and the northeastern coast on the mouth of the Tyne. My dad's family comes from up near Ashington way. And all my holidays used to be up at South Shields. It's a beautiful beach, it's a lovely part of the world, And years and years and years ago, BA had an offer. If you flew from Heathrow to Newcastle and stayed over the weekend and came back on the Monday, it was super cheap. So we went, me and my mum said, come on, should we do it? Never been abroad, I've never been in a jet. She'd been abroad on a propeller plane donkeys years ago. And come on, so we did it. And it was a 757. And back then, you could go on the flight deck. Mm-hmm. And they knew it was our first flight. And they said, come in the flight deck. So I got on the flight deck, and there was no TCAS. And I know the 2 lads were looking for an aircraft going over. You see this plane going over, because we had no collision avoidance stuff. So you had to, air traffic would tell you, and you'd look out the window for it. It wasn't on your screen. So they couldn't chat too much. I had a look up there and I just thought, I went back and sat down with my mum and said, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm doing this apprenticeship. I hated it. I was going to be an electrical fitter, joined down in London. It was dangerous, you know, it was a dangerous job. It was dirty, it was smelly and it was hard work and I just hated it. And that's what I want to do, so I started having flying lessons.
Do you think the seeds planted of your early days when you were back at Heathrow had just sort of sprouted through and stuck with you?
Yeah, but you know, I mean, the thing is, I left school with next to no qualifications.
Yeah,
I've got a couple in sort of basic engineering stuff for the electrical fitting jointing job. Nothing that would stand out. You know, you go to flying schools. Oh well, you need degrees to be an airline pilot. I'm like, hold my BMX, watch this space, sort of thing. You know, I'm not having that.
Yeah, I think it's changed a lot, hasn't it? I mean, back then, I think people ask you for advice these days about how do I become a pilot, and you can't really answer for these days. But it doesn't seem too different in the way that you don't need to be, super high on qualifications. You just need to have the interest, and obviously the money becomes an issue as well.
That's the big problem now.
And it's the same these days where there are it looks like there's some ways to fund sort of a pilot training course, but it's pretty expensive, isn't it, as well?
It's got a lot more expensive, yeah. But I mean, a few years ago there was a big long line of people at the door holding a cheque for £120,000, whatever it was back then, to do it. And certain banks would give them career development loans, or they were handing the money out like it was going out of fashion.
Right.
That's now changed.
Yeah.
And from what I gather now, the schools they haven't got a big queue of people anymore. And, I mean, it's up, I think it's about 150, 160,000 now. And you've got to be absolutely sure this is what you want to do. And it's not an easy process. There's exams and tests all the way through. You start off on the written exams, you get them out the way, you start the flying. You've got to get all them out the way, and then you work your way up, and eventually they'll put you in a simulator. One of these lads was saying he spent 6 months in a simulator on this MPL, 6 months just in a simulator, just flying Airbuses, doing procedures time and time again.
That part of the training, or is that what he was doing?
That is part of the MPL course, yeah. Because I don't even think you walk out with a PPL anymore. In the old days, you did. You walk, but now I don't even think you have that. I think it's just multi-pilot. I don't know how it all works these days. It's all changed. See, I did it the old-fashioned way. In the old days, what would happen is you get your PPL, you'd build your hours up. You needed 100 hours, and however many night, I can't remember what it was. And then you'd do a night rate, and then you'd do an IMC rate, and so you could fly basically, cloud stuff. And then what a lot of guys did, they went into instructing. And you'd instruct for a few years, you'd get your hours up. And then the airlines, certain airlines, Flybe used to do sponsorships, and you'd go to a turboprop operator, and you'd fly a turboprop for a few years, get a few hours of, the commercial world, and then you'd go into the airlines as a jet. It was unheard of that you would go away for a year, do your course, and then suddenly you'd be in the right-hand seat of a jet. It was just very, very rarely happened, if at all. And again, I was very blessed. I was in the right, I was working as a flying instructor. I was working for a fantastic school down in Denham called the Pilot Centre. I still, every time, if I go down there, we pop in and see them. It's a brilliant school. The family who own the airfield. And really, you should get them on because they absolutely live and breathe aviation. They've got this airfield in Denham. They've got their houses around the airfield. They could sell all of that up for millions to developers. You're right next to the M40, you're right next to the M25, you're right next to London, you've got rail links, you're right next to HS2, everything's there. They could sell it, but they won't because they just love their planes. And it was a real eye-opener because some of the flying schools you go to, you could tell they're in it for the money. And these guys aren't, they're in it because they love it.
Wow, yeah.
And I was working for them, and there was a mate of mine who's now a skipper at TUI at Luton. And he got all the scholarships, the gap hand scholarships. His night rating was a scholarship. This rate, and he was the golden boy. He was very, very good, far better than me. And he was getting all these scholarships. And this sponsorship came up with the airline Australis and the website P Prune, and they used to do these funded type ratings on 737s and 757s. And there were 4 jobs available. And I was leaving one night on a Sunday night at the flying club, and he said, "Why don't you put in for it?" I was like, "Leave it out, mate. You're the golden boy. You're going to get this. If anyone's going to get it, it'll be you." "Oh, why don't you chance it?" I got home and something just gave me a kick. I said, "Just put in for it." So I put in for it. 450 people put in for this, and I was one of 4 who got the job. And it was a fully paid type rating on the 757 plus a job at the end of it. And I did 3.5 years at Australis, and I loved every second of it.
What do you think made you stand out on that? Do you think there was anything in particular? I mean, obviously you got the hours that were probably required, but did the bikes help?
No, not at all. I think the interview was done by a guy called John Mahon, who I still talk to today. He's not well at the moment. He's a lovely, lovely bloke. And there was another guy there called Tony Layfield, who was, he was at Australis for years. I haven't seen him for a long time, but he was a really good lad. And at the end of the interview, they turned around and said, "Tell us a joke." And if anyone's watched the streams, they know how bad my jokes are. But obviously this day my joke was good. I don't know. I mean, I did, just before we had the sim, because I got through to the sim stage, just before the sim stage, I went down to London Guildhall. I had a friend who was doing the MCC courses down there, had a King Air. So we just flew a few procedural approaches, and he said, you can fly you can fly fine. He said, that's not a problem. He said, but everyone else can. He said, you've got to stand out. You've got to stand out from the rest. And I thought, how can I do that? How can I, we're all going to fly the same approaches. We're all going to be of a similar standard. How can I stand out? So what I did is every time I was trimmed and level and just had a minute, I'd have a chat with them. "Oh, lads, this is most fun you can have with your trousers on. Oh, this is great," sort of thing, and have a little bit of chat with them. And when they were telling you how to, why don't you use this track line and do this, listen to them and apply it. But still, when you've got a spare bit of capacity, have a chat. And I think that may have been what set me apart, but I don't know. But I had the capacity to fly the aircraft and a little chat at the same time, rather than one of the lads. I remember he was a smashing fella. He was like, "I was just sitting there terrified all the time," and I was like, "Oh, okay, fair enough." But yeah, we did that. I found the training difficult. Struggled with my first lot of base training. I struggled with my first recurrent sim. Got past, but it was hard work. And as time went on, I got better. There were some great trainers there. There was a couple who weren't so good. Luckily, one of them left. Generally, everyone at Australis was fantastic. And, they would help you. It was really, really good. So I did that for 3.5 years. Enjoyed every second of it. I still talk to people there today. There's one lad I speak to regularly. He was a flying instructor. I've known him for years. He was at Denham for a bit, and then he came from Air 2000 to Australis, got his command at Australis. I did a lot of I was his FO for a lot of his first command flights. And it was great because the captain had to do all the takeoffs and landings. So I was just sitting there for a week, not having to do anything, just doing the paintwork and the radio and putting the wheels up and down. It was great. It was so easy. And he's a smashing lad. He ended up, he was a skipper on the 787 at Norwegian, and now he's flying a 747 cargo. But he's a great lad. And they'd all help you and encourage you and give you tips. I remember that Tony Layfield told me a tip on the 75 about the descent, about if you're high and as you're coming back onto the path, you're going faster. So you have to get low. So for every 10 knots fast, you get 300 feet low. And I tell that to people on the Airbus because it works on the Airbus. And I did it the other day with a young girl on her first check. She'd just finished her line training. She did a great job. And I told her that. She said, "Have you got any tips?" I said, "Yeah." And I was really wanting to get a bit high coming into Manchester. And thank God that happened. And I got to show her it and demo it. And the trainer who was checking leant over and went, "I like that. I'm going to start using that." I said, "Well, it's an old 75 trip, but it works on this thing."
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a brilliant aircraft. Love the 75.
I was going to say the 75 was probably your heyday. I assume it was your golden years of aviation, and they're still in the sky today, to be fair. But was that just at Australis you flew them?
Yeah. It flew nicely. I found it. It was overpowered, but it had nice balanced controls. It flew. It had a smaller control column than the 7.3. You had, the thing called a pitch power cover. You put the power on the nose, goes up, take the power off the nose, goes down. But it wasn't. You just got used to it. It wasn't like a real big deal. It was just nice. It was big. It had a big, thick, chunky wing, 4-wheel truck. So as you land, the back wheels are hanging down, so you could grease it on. I mean, hammered it in many times, especially during training. But it was just a beautiful, beautiful aircraft. It looked after you. It didn't have any. I can't remember any gotchas, anything that you really had to watch for. Yeah. Unlike some other aircraft that I've flown.
Do you think with the Airbus though, it kind of holds your hand a little bit too much? Do you prefer having a bit more control?
Yeah, it's it's all right when everything's going well. When you're in the simulator and things start going wrong, it knocks the autopilot out a bit too easily. You lose your flight directors a bit too easily. You lose your auto thrust a bit too easily. It's times where you need to manage a situation where really you want autopilot, auto thrust, flight directors. You want it to be able to keep flying. You know, the autopilots to keep working. The 757, it took a lot to knock the autopilot out. With the Airbus, you know, you lose certain systems. There's a couple there I've talked to trainers and engineers I can't get an answer for. A dual SFCC failure, it's called. It knocks everything out. I'm just, why? It's just a computer that runs either the flaps or the slats. It's just a computer. But you lose 2 channels and, you know, now suddenly you're like, oh, okay, this has now got very boring. It's not nice in the wind. It's not like a Boeing. Yeah, it's not nice at all in the wind. Yeah. I remember coming into Gatwick on the second runway 26. Oh no, it's 08 left. We're coming back in from Sierra Leone. There was a fantastic captain called Jamie Taylor, who's unfortunately just recently passed away. He was younger than me. Lovely lad. And it was a strong wind, and it was across the runway, and I'm like, you know, do you not think you should be doing this? No, you're right, you get on with it. And he was just sitting there looking out the window, and he was like, no, you're fine, you'll be fine, get on with it. And I'm like, are you sure? And I didn't want to do it, but he made me, and thank God it was a lovely smooth landing, you know, and it was perfect, and it really boosted me confidence. I did message him when I heard he was unwell just to thank him, because it was really a good confidence boost. And it's what I needed at the time. But yeah, with the Airbus in a strong wind, it's not nice. You know, I was in, like I said on the stream before, Storm Dudley. That was the worst one I've had. I hurt me back. We hit a gust over just near 3,000 feet, I think. The aircraft just got shook by this gust and it hurt my back. I was like, dear me, here we go. And I did storm Eunice a couple of days later. And I've done a few of the storms now, but Dudley was the worst. Even when the cabin crew came up and shook my hand after that one. But the good thing about the Airbus is that you can use the autopilot down to 160 feet. Mm-hmm. Now with a Boeing, you'd want to take the autopilot out, auto thrust out. You want to get a feel for what's happening. You want to get in, you know, in the sync of it. With the Airbus, you're not got the direct control. You're asking computers to do things. I want to be that pitch. I want to be wings level. You hit a gust, the computer goes, oh, we want it to be wings level. So it'll slowly level the wings, but it'll take a bit of time to do it. And then you've got to put an input in, and you can get out of sync. And you'll see them in a windy day sometimes. You'll see the guys out of sync with the computer, and the computer's just, you know, the best advice ever given is, don't touch that stick unless you really have to. So what I do, I just leave the autopilot into 160 feet, take it out, and just like that until you get on the ground. But yeah, I'm not in the wind. It's horrible.
But having that power helps a lot, right? That the 7.5 had.
The 7.5, yeah, I mean that was good. If you needed to get it back up, it went up very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good like that.
But they're very safe though. They've got a good record, the Airbus, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean it's a good aircraft. I think it's too complicated for what we use it for. If you know, one of my mates, I think, is coming on here soon. He liked the 7.3. Personally, I didn't, but for flying, you know, short hops around Europe, it was all right. It was quite basic. There wasn't a lot to go wrong with it. Whereas the Airbus, it's got, you know, like 17 computers to flush a toilet, something. It's just a bit too complicated, and it doesn't need to be. It's nice having the table. You've got a nice big cockpit. It's not as big as the 7.5s, but it's bigger than the 7.3s. You've got your table. You can do your flight plans on it. You can eat your dinner. It's nice and spacious. It's nice and bright. The windows are bigger, so you get more light in. It's easier to stay awake. It's a nicer working environment. Like I say, until you've got problems, and then it starts to get quite, you know, it can get quite complicated. But yeah, it is what it is. They've sold thousands, and they're going to continue to sell them. It's a good aircraft, but you know, it has its, you know, there's certain little things you need to be aware of with it. Whereas the 7.3, I just didn't like it at all. I couldn't stick it.
So Australis, what were you doing there? You were doing, was it charter flights, or was it just?
It was scheduled and charter. Okay. They had their scheduled routes. A lot of it to Africa. They had a contract with a company called Jet Air taking oil workers. So we went to Kazakhstan with the oil workers, Hassan Massoud in the Algerian desert. We did Equatorial Guinea. We used to do it. It's in the armpit of Africa. You've got an island called Malabo. You'd fly 7.5 hours down there. You'd sit there and you'd wait an hour and a half for the sun to come up. And then you take off in 7.5 and fly VFR, visually round towards Bata, the main capital. And they've just built the airport for the president. And you'd find a beacon and you'd leave this beacon and you just hope that you see the runway in front of you. There was no, I mean, now it's got ILSs and all the kit you'd want, but back then it didn't. And they had no lights either. So anyway, you'd land there, you'd go off for 12 hours in this Epoxy hotel, and then you'd go back. By the time you get back, you're at night. You're in the thing called the intertropical convergence zone. You've got these massive thunderstorms everywhere. You take off out of there at night. You can't get back in because there's no lights. So the only really you've got Douala in Cameroon up here somewhere, and then you've got this island again that you can aim for. And I remember coming off once. There was just thunderstorms everywhere, and the seatbelts never came off once. It was just using the weather radar to try and find a gap through, and eventually we get near the island, and you'd fly this sort of circle to land, following this VOR radial. And at the end, there's a thunderstorm here, so it was like fly half it and then cut the corner and get in. I'm just sitting there thinking, I get paid enough for this, we used to. We had a contract with a company called Dallo Airlines out doing Djibouti and back out of Paris. So you'd do Hassim Massoud in the morning, then you'd get another crew would get on the back. You'd then fly to Paris. You'd get off. They'd then go down to Djibouti, have 12 hours there, then fly back. You'd be waiting for them at Paris to take them back to Gatwick. That was an interesting one.
You really flew to some crazy destinations, especially
and then
around Africa.
I mean, you do Egypt, you do the Greek islands, you do Iceland. It was always varied. It was very, very interesting. It was always different. Do Chambéry in the winter for the ski tours. That was always interesting. Flying down this valley, you used to call it the Valley of Doom. You're looking up at houses, up either side, and you've got this little runway at the end of a lake. And it was captain's only landing, and the FOs used to do the departure, and it was one in, one out, because you had to take off the way you'd come in. And the missed approach was quite complex. You'd go ahead to this NDB, Charlie Hotel, I think it was, and you'd turn 90 degrees, and as soon as your wings level, you then turn 270 and come back out the way you came. And if the wind was out of limits, so 75 had a 15-knot tailwind, but it's only a 2,000-metre runway, so it's a bit short. If the wind went out of limits, you'd have to do a circle. So you'd fly down, and then you'd peel off, and you'd fly. Bearing in mind you've got a mountain coming up here, and you'd have to fly along this motorway and aim for a hospital. And you'd turn around the hospital, and then you'd come in and land that way. And I remember I'd gone in with a really good lad called Pat Doggett. He's a lovely man, lovely, lovely bloke. And we'd landed, and we'd just got in. The wind started to get out of limits for that, so you had to do the circle, but the cloud base was too low to do it. And I heard on the radio this Russian, I think it was Vim Airways, it's purple and white 75 with Pratt & Whitney engines. I used to see them a lot. He was going to do the circle, and I shouted, I said, Pat, come on here, we're going to see a plane crash here. And we went out and we watched this plane, and it came down and it broke off and it went towards the mountain and it went into the cloud. Now, you're flying a visual procedure. You've got to be visual. You've got to see the ground you're trying to avoid. And you can't trust your map, because the old 75s didn't have GPS. You had map shift. So you weren't actually 100% certain you were exactly where you were. And there's holes in the cloud. And every so often you see this purple and white plane appear and then disappear. And I'm just sitting there watching it. We were waiting for the bang. And somehow we got it in. And we were sitting there like, oh dear me, It was a frightening thing to watch. Yeah. But they're still out there, unfortunately.
I think they've clamped down a lot on kind of more nefarious approaches. Yeah. And, the approaches probably still exist. I mean, there are some quite tricky ones these days. Some in Europe, isn't there?
Yeah.
Require special training and stuff. But it seems like they are a bit of a dying breed now, aren't they?
Yeah, it's not a bad thing.
So it sounds like, because I'm just thinking about it from the point of view of like driving a car. Like, I think we enjoy having GPS, but it sounds like as a pilot, you prefer to use like instruments and traditional ways of.
It's safer having GPS. It makes your life a lot easier. But for me, for starting off in the airline world, it was good because it got me tracking instruments, tracking needles, like you did on your Seneca and your instrument rating on one engine, bimbling around. And it gives you a good grounding of how it all works in navigation. When all the kit fails, that's what you're going back to. The FMC, both FMGCs fail on an Airbus, you're tracking needles. So you need to be able to do it. So my airline, the latest, they've been doing it for a while now. They do little exercises where you do needle tracking to beacons, tracking away from beacons, timed, leave this beacon, right, it's a 5-mile leg, right, I'm doing 180 knots, 3 miles a minute, start my stopwatch, 3 minutes, I start turning, and it'll work out perfectly. It's all dead reckoning stuff. That when it all goes wrong and you lose those two computers and you're on your own flying it in a dark and dirty night, in the middle of terrain, say, in Dalaman, that's exactly what you're going to revert to. So you need to be able to do it. And there's a big thing at the moment, a lot of guys are getting a bit umpy about, called children magenta. A lot of guys that come out, all they can do is follow the line on the map. And needle tracking and stuff like that's becoming a bit of a lost art, and now some airlines have realised this and they're starting to bring it back. Raw data stuff, dead reckoning, making sure you know where you are all the time, because the kit's all well and good, but when it doesn't work, the startle factor is, whoa, hang on a minute. There's a friend of mine, she did her command last year, she's an absolutely brilliant girl. She came out of Geneva on the Airbus and she lost both FMGCs. So she'd lost her maps, she'd lost her terrain, all the stuff that shows where the high ground is. A lot of high ground around Geneva. Anyway, the FO was flying it, so they did a fantastic job. They got it round. She managed to get one of the computers back, got the ILS set up. It was just basic fly headings, come back in, raw data, ILS and land. And she's been around, she's been at my company longer than I have. She's been around for years, and she was being my baby, I think, before that. And it's that sort of thing that is so important when it goes wrong. And a lot of the airlines as well they're concentrating on the startle factor. We saw it in Air France 447, we saw it in the Air Asia crash. The startle factor, when something big goes wrong, the startle factor, in Air France, the guy just pulled the stick back and stalled the aircraft. Whereas, I like to, again, when guys or girls turn around and say, have you got any tips? Well, here's a good tip for you. We're up in the cruise in an Airbus. We're at 35,000 feet, right? Take your height, 35, add 52, 85, 85% on the engines keeps you safe. And that's pretty much where it's going to be. If it's a 319 and Neo, you're not 5 off. If you're at 38,000 feet, 38 plus 50, 88, 88% keeps you safe. 2.5 degrees pitch, 88% keeps you alive while the mate gets the QRH out and finds out, fine-tunes the settings and works out what the problem is. And it's things like that you've got to have in the back of your head while you're flying along, because if this happens for real, you need something to rely on. Not just, the automatics have gone, I'll just pull the stick up and everyone dies. Is
that an issue with the Airbus? And like you said, the autopilot getting pulled out very quick? Does that sometimes start autopilots?
Certain things suddenly, the best thing to do is do nothing. Don't touch it. It's trimmed. It's inherently stable. It's got to be, otherwise they wouldn't certify it. So everything drops out. It's not suddenly going to do something wacky, unless it's severe turbulence or something, in which case you've got, you set your pitch and your power and you just sit there and ride it out. I can't remember the pitch power settings for the 737. I think the power settings were higher because it's less aerodynamic.
Yeah.
Crap.
So going back to Australis, what happened? How did you move on from Australis? What happened at the end?
Well, I always wanted to move back to the northeast, and by this time I'm married. The wife wasn't keen on the idea, and then one day she said, no, come on, we're going to do it. All right, fair enough. So I put in with another airline, not Australis' competition. There was another airline that was Australis' competition. I'm not going there, I'm not going to do that. And I put into another airline, and they offered me 2 bases, one near London and one at Newcastle. And those are the 2 options I put down. And when they gave me the job, they said, well, you can, we'll give you Newcastle. I'm like, happy days, all right. So then I had to move the family up there. And that was, when the girl phoned me out, I remember sitting in our house in High Wycombe at the time on the phone, and put the phone down. I just sat there and just had a bit of a breakdown. I'm like, how am I going to move everything up 300 miles away? It was really quite a difficult job. And we had to find a house. We had the first house fall through, find a house, buy a house, change airline, do a type rating. Luckily, it was a Boeing, so it wasn't that much different. Go through all the training, pass me training, and move a family 300 miles. It was hard times.
It's quite common for pilots to move around, isn't it?
Yeah,
I hear people move all over the country, all over the world sometimes.
Yeah. As I've said on the streams at the moment, I'm commuting. My family's still in the northeast, and I work at Manchester. So I'm doing 30,000 miles a year. I've got a little flat nearby now as my base when I'm down here, and I'm doing that for the next 14 years. But yeah, it is what it is. The other final straw, I'd been to Ghana, and we had 4 or 5 days in Ghana, 4 or 5 days in Sierra Leone, fourth day in Banjul. But I'd been to Ghana this trip, and I can't remember what had happened. There'd been a change or something had gone on. So we flew back on Ghana Airways. And I wasn't feeling very well when we got on the plane. And we got back, and I really wasn't feeling well. And I had a day off, and then I was in at 4 o'clock the next morning to be on the jump seat for a lad under training going to Sharm el Sheikh and back. And I woke up in the morning, and I was being violently sick. I was vomiting blood. And I thought, this is not good. And I remember phoning up a mate of mine, Tony, in crew, and I said, Tony, I can't do it. He said, you're joking? He said, I've got no one else. I said, mate, I'm puking blood. I can't go, a 15-hour day to Sharm el Sheikh and back, I'm puking blood. Leave it with me, phones you back about 5 minutes later. Yeah, Tony Layfield said he'll do it. I like handsome, lovely. So off to the doctor's first thing in the morning. He said, where have you been? I've just come back from Ghana, hospital. So I spent a week in hospital, puking blood on a drip with suspected malaria. And a couple of our cabin crew got malaria. One of them, she was on life support. And I used to still hear from her. She was out in the Caribbean last I heard. The climate was better for her, I think, but she was broken. There's a couple of them got it. And they never found out what I had. I'd picked something up there. I don't know what it was. But after a week, they went, oh, well, yeah, off you go. And I'd sat there for, I think it was 2 days. And then I called one of the nurses. I said, look, has my test results come back? Have I got malaria? And she went, oh, yeah, they came back 2 days ago. Yeah, no, you haven't got it. I'm like, oh, thanks for telling me. I was sitting there thinking, this could be life-changing. And, yeah, thank God I didn't have it. I don't know what I did have. They never found out. But that was the last straw, really. I was like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. I love it, but I need to go somewhere else.
I suppose with your current airline, you're not really flying to like tropical destinations, staying over, and
no, you don't get that in the Isle of Man.
So moving on to your current work life, you're a very busy guy.
Yes,
and I think a lot of that is because you are splitting like work and life. It's so defined. You got like you're either 100% work or you're 100% at home.
Yeah, it's been a hard summer. The commuting's hard. I asked to do late shifts, and I don't get it. I get normally 1 week late, 1 week as early, and that's terrible for your health.
So what you do, is that quite standard for the average pilot in your airline? It's like you sort of work, is it a couple of days and then you have a couple of days off? Is that
it's normally 5 on, 4 off, 3 on. 5 on, 4 off, 5 on, 3 off.
Right.
And you get that for 3 months, and then you get one random month where they just give you whatever they like. So and then I'm stuck down here most of the time because it's 4 on, 2 off, 3 on, 1 off, 4 on, and you can't go home.
Are you in more demand because you're a captain, or is it like
we're short captains?
Yeah,
we're short of FOs, but there have been a few coming through. But yeah, we're short of captains. The idea is if I'm doing a late shift, then I can drive down that morning, go to work, and then I can drive home. I get home, I'm normally finishing just before midnight. Sometimes you end up working it a day off, quite often actually, and you get home at 3, 4 in the morning. So you have a good nap, and then you're ready to spend time with your family. So you don't get to see your kids grow up.
How do you deal with like falling asleep at such different times? Like I struggle to go to sleep an hour earlier than usual sometimes. I don't know.
Mate, I'm fantastic in bed. I can sleep all day.
Right.
It's day one of earlies is normally a nightmare.
Yeah.
A lot of people struggle to sleep on day one of an early shift. I'm now in on a week of earlies, even though I asked for lates. Yeah. I've driven down a day early to come see you boys and do this, and then I'm going to go back to my flat and I'm going to settle down nice and early. Normally, I can normally get a reasonable night's kip the night before. But some of the lads, they love earlies. They think they're the greatest thing ever. But for me, I can't stand them. I have to come down a day early. You get woken up by noises through the night. It's difficult to get a kit, but I don't seem to struggle like some of them do. And then you start, the other day I did a Malta. I got up at 2:30 in the morning. I got back at 5 o'clock at night, and then I had a 4-hour drive home. And normally the earlies are starting earlier and finishing later, whereas the early shifts used to be not quite as bad, and now you're starting earlier, finishing later. The next 2 days, tomorrow I'm getting back from Tenerife in time for the rush hour. So it's going to take me an hour and a half to get back to my flat, maybe 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I'm on minimum rest before I'm back in again to do Antalya. And it's always minimum rest. And, they look at, you see the video that we did on Pilot Explains about the flight time limitations. It's a limit, not a target. Minimum rest is a minimum, not a target. And there are a few airlines around the world, there's quite a few airlines who are treating it like that now. And I know there was an airline, they had a crash a few years ago, a friend of mine was on it. And when they looked at the captain's roster, everyone went, yeah, that's cheeky. I think he did 6 days on, 4 days off, 5 days, 6 days on, 3 days off, 5 days on, 2 days off. And the day before he'd been to India, the day before the crash. And then he'd taken off. He'd flown 4.5 hours to this airport where the weather is atrocious. It was one of the Russian airports. They'd had a go at landing. They couldn't land. They circled for 2.5 hours. A couple of Russians had a go and couldn't get in. If the Russians can't get in, you ain't getting in. They then had another approach, went around, had this almost a graphic illusion and stove the plane into the ground at 400 knots. And, you know, when you're working those sort of hours, no wonder the blokes weren't on form. You know, they've been airborne 6.5 hours after, you know, a punishing 6 days on of horrendously long flights. Your performance drops off.
Because sometimes we have like a night where we just can't sleep or we're disturbed sleep. But for you, that sounds like a big deal if you had like a really bad night's sleep. Yeah, well, like
we've got a really strong union. And they've spent a lot of time working with the company, making that our flight time limitations are fair. A few years ago, Europe turned around and said, "Oh, you can the new limits. They've extended. You can work an extra, you know, some cases 2 or 3 hours a day. When, you know, no extra. You know, you don't get a rest or anything." And our union went, "Hang on, we're not doing that. We're just not doing that." And you've got a fatigue monitoring scheme as well. So if you're fatigued and you're unfit, you just phone up crew and you say, if you can get through, and you say, "I'm fatigued, I can't do it." Fair enough, fill a fatigue report in, and that's it. And you write in, and you put in how much rest you've had, how many hours you've done, when you last worked. And you fill it all in, and you send it off. And the fatigue team will look at it and come back with a score out of 5 about how fatiguing they think it was.
All right.
But if you're fatigued and you're not fit to fly, this is what's good about my airline: you don't fly. If you know, even on day one, if you wake up and you're just absolutely knackered and you can't do it, you phone them and say, "I can't do it." You can't do it.
But you've got to then prove to them as well.
Well, no, you just fill the form in. Yeah. You know, it might come back. I mean, I had an event, a fumes event recently. I was quite unwell off of it, and I went fatigued on one of the days because I was so still not well off of this fumes event. And it came back with a score of 0. They said, "Well, you know, looking at what you've done and that, we find it a score of 0. But if you're not well or you don't fly." Whereas other airlines, certain other airline in the UK, a few years ago, they had a captain who'd apparently lost his son, a baby son, whatever, and he phoned up and said, I can't fly. And they said, "Get and fly the plane or find another job." And he went in and flew the plane and nearly turned the thing over. Whereas our lot, they're very, very good like that. They will turn around and say, "If you're not fit, you don't fly."
I guess like emotional fatigue is another thing as well. Like you can't push someone too far. They might have problems at home as well. They might have other issues that they're trying to deal with.
I mean, I've had, over the years, a variety of family disasters.
Yeah.
And, my base captain, a guy called Steve, was brilliant. I phoned him up and said, "Steve, this is what's happened." He's like, "Bloody hell." I said, "I need a bit of time." I said, "Have what you want. Call me when you're ready. Call me when you're fit." When my mum died, I phoned him up and said, "I need a bit of time." Off you go. Not a problem. And, they understand we're human. They understand this happens. Whereas some airlines would say, "I don't care."
Yeah.
Get yourself in and fly the plane.
You mentioned earlier that there was a bit of a shortage of pilots. You're kind of, high in demand, should we say. Is there many new pilots coming through in your airline?
There is. There's a lot of cadets coming through. Like I said, I did a line check on a young lady called Abby just recently. She was brilliant, absolutely first class. I was so impressed with her. She was really, really, really good. I'm flying with a lot of guys. They have a little mark next to their name, so they're new. They know they're, until they get their 6 months sim, the first one out of the way, they keep this mark next to their line. So they're new. That guy who was on the stream the other day with me, whose messenger, he was a guy called Chris, absolutely brilliant. He's very, very good, and he's a lovely bloke. But they are coming through. But from what I gather, is the queue out the door of the flying schools is drying up because people can't get the loans. That no one, Oh no, I certainly haven't got £150,000 sitting down the back of my settee waiting to be found.
That's it, yeah. And
so it is drying up.
A lot of them are doing these cadet programs, aren't they? Which are, is it like TUI, Virgin have their own? I think BA have just announced.
BA announced one, yeah. It's good. I mean, we need to get Fez on one of them, really, don't we?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Just to give you guys a bit of peace and quiet more than anything, but no, I mean, he should be in a flight deck, and he's very good.
Yeah.
I'll never tell him with his face, but he is very good. I mean, you watch his flight sims. You think a type rating on an Airbus can take 3 months of learning, and he knows that plane inside out. Yeah. And then the next week he's in a 7.3, and he knows that plane inside out. And then he's in the Antonov 225, and I've just gone down the back to put the batteries on. I'm like, the knowledge of the kid's great, and he should be doing one of these things, and they are good. Because
Fezza told me that he applied for one, and the questions he was getting was like out of this world. They were so hard, like problem solving and things. I don't think you need like high qualifications, and obviously with these cadet programs, they'll fund a lot of it. But I think one issue is you do need to kind of fund yourself a little bit. You need to pay for your own bills, maybe have some source of income that can help you through.
Yeah.
But it's great to see so many of them there.
Yeah, we need more of them.
Yeah.
We need more of them.
Like I said, with Fezza being a good example, someone who's coming from a flight sim background, people who are really into flight sim, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Like, they could definitely give it a thought.
Well, there were 2 cabin crew lads at Newcastle who desperately wanted to do it, and the scholarship side of things had dried up. And they would have been brilliant. They would have been absolutely outstanding. One of them got himself a PPL. And he took, I remember it was hilarious, he was seeing one of the cabin crew at the time, lovely girl, and he'd gone up to Eschot in Northumberland, and they'd gone for a fly. And as they landed, he'd arranged the flying school to have a banner up with "Marry Me" on it, and he got down on one knee in front of the plane and proposed to her. And I thought it was great, but he was a lovely lad, and it would have been lovely to see him and the other guy both do these scholarships and get in the flight deck, because they desperately wanted to do it, and they would have been good at it as well. Yeah, it's a shame, but yeah, I mean, in the old days there were quite a few. Like I said, Cab Air did them, Flybe did them, Australis did them with Pete Prune. There was a few. British Midland did them. I remember going for one of them years ago. When I don't even think I had a PPL. I had to go to Oxford and do this day of, assessments and all of this, and it's that's what you need.
So do people need PPLs these days, or do they just go straight onto this cadet program?
No, I mean, you don't. I don't think you need it. I don't think it's a requirement. Well, one of our cabin crew has got in on the TUI scheme, and he had a PPL. He hadn't had it long. I think he got it early this year. I remember he was coming up for his sim check, and it was on the 7.3. So I was trying to remember everything about the 7.3 and typing it down and sending it on Messenger. And anyway, I mean, he obviously never listened to a word I said because he got the job. So that was good. But yeah, he'll do. It was really nice to see a picture of him in his uniform with his little stripes on. It was good.
So I think you're a bit of a fan of Airbus, and you're a bit of a fan of Boeing. Maybe more classic Boeing is more your
I love
thing.
the 7.5. I didn't like. I mean, I flew the NG. I didn't like the 7.3. The Airbus, I tolerate it. It has its good points. It has its bad points. You're never going to beat flying a 757 with that power and the handling of it with an Airbus.
Yeah.
You're just not. You're just not.
But day in, day out, you're enjoying the Airbus now?
Yeah. I mean, for like I said, for what we use it for, I do think it's overcomplicated. Yeah. But for a working environment, it's all right. You've got your table, you've got your big open windows, you've got a nice view. It keeps you awake. It looks after you. The 7.3 had a lot of, because it was the overhead panel, a lot of it was straight out the original ones. You had to do a lot of it yourself. Your engine anti-ice, you put the igniters on, put the anti-ice on. The anti-ice is next to hydraulics. You've got to make sure the switches are the same. You make sure you switch the anti-ice off and not the hydraulics. Someone did that to me in flight. Before you start the engines, you've got to turn the packs off. You've got to put the bleed on. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. And whereas the Airbus, you want to start the engines, you turn the switch, make sure all the gauges are right, and you've got pressure, and just switch it on like that and sit there and watch it. The 7.3, you've got to put the, you've got to sit there, start the engines, put them on ground. You've got to sit there, wait for it to get to a certain speed, put the fuel in, watch it like a hawk, and cut it off if it's not doing what you want it to do. And it's you're doing that 4 times a day. It gets boring pretty quickly.
We spoke earlier about Pilot Explains. I mean, one of the videos is doing really well. which is the fear of flying one. And obviously you've got plenty of other episodes too. Pretty well known for it now as well. And actually you've been recognised a few times, haven't you, out and about in the real world now.
It's funny, isn't it? Yeah, I've had people ask for a flight deck visit when we've landed. They've come up. We've had VIPs, fans from the site come in.
How do they know it's you? Do they just see you and then you're just there? And
I don't sound like a normal pilot, do I? Not to any of the posh people.
Yeah.
You know, I worked on building sites for 11 years. I don't speak like most people, so they twig straight away who it is. I've had people at the airport come up to me, some of the ramp lads, and at the TAS fair especially.
Yeah.
And what's nice, it's really rewarding. I'm grateful, you know, for you guys for doing that video. Because what's really rewarding is when people come up to you and said, I haven't flown in years, or I've never flown, I've been too scared until I watched your video and now I'm going to go and do it.
Wow.
There was one lad at the TAS, not the last TAS fair, the one before, he was there with his daughter. She's been on holidays, I think she was about 15 at the time. She's been on holiday, he won't go. And we had a chat, probably an hour or so, and he said, after that video and after watching that, we're going to go and book a holiday and I'm going to get on a plane. And I'm like, good, that's what it should be. That's what it should be like.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's good.
I guess, I often get people on the plane who are scared of flying, people who are having a bit of nervous breakdowns and
quite often.
Getting a bit emotional.
On the ground, you know, I say, well, you know, do you want to have a look up the front? And sometimes like, and some like, yeah, I'll have a look.
Yeah.
And I remember we had a few weeks back, I can't remember what was going on. We were delayed, there was air traffic restrictions, there was a problem with a passenger needed to be offloaded because he was drunk and kicking off. I think we had a technical issue with the plane as well. I think we'd gone back on the stand. Yeah, that's right. We'd had a leak on one of the engines. We'd gone back on the stand. The engineers got the engines open. They're hammering the screwdriver out. They're banging away under the engine.
Is this the home base or is this away?
This was at Manchester.
Yeah.
And we weren't going far. And we had these girls on board, these young girls who were terrified. That was right. It started with a bloke on board who was terrified. And we got him in the flight deck. We sat him down and showed him, you know, around the flight deck, and he felt a bit happier. And, you know, he said, I'm a bit happy. I'll go and sit down. I said, all right, you know, no worries. He said, I'll shake your hand when we make it to our destination. I'm like, all right, fair enough. And then we got these three girls in, and they were terrified. And while I'm dealing with the passenger issue, the FO is giving them the tour of the flight deck, and they came out a lot happier. And in the end, we ended up having to swap aircraft, which the nervous passengers didn't like at all. But we got them to their destination, and they were all happy. But yeah, if you can give them a flight deck visit, that makes a big difference. Yeah, it does help a lot.
I think as a pilot, you've got to be calm as well, isn't it? Like a swan, I think they say. Like, you've got to, even if things are going wrong and it's very manic, you can't appear stressed and chaotic.
Yeah, you're nice and calm on the surface and paddling like mad underneath.
That's
it's like that. Yeah. I mean, the first officers, majority of them, all of them are fantastic, and a lot of them are very good at doing the flight deck visits. So if you're trying to deal with engineers and dealing with ops and trying to get a new flight plan and talking to crewing, they can do that, or they can make the phone calls, and they can do it all. They can do it all. And it's great because you can split all the tasks. The other day we had a nightmare in Antalya. We had a passenger who attacked one of the cabin crews. Had to go back on stand. FO's on the phone to ops. I'm on the phone to flight planning. And then the other day we were delayed into Milan. We were so close to having to cancel the flight because we ran out of hours. So he's on the phone to flight planning saying, we've got enough fuel, reroute us around the slot so we don't have to enter this restriction. I'm on the phone to crew and saying, is there anything we can do to get this flight going? I've got 180 people on board. And, the cabin crew are doing a great job keeping the passengers calm and, keeping you involved, because again, violent passengers have to be offloaded and arrested. They're letting you know all the time. And you all work together, and it's really good like that. It's really good.
How does the sort of whole commuting and moving, how does that affect family life, and has that been tough, and is that something that people can overcome?
It's very, very tough because I'm away so much, and on my days off I'm normally quite wiped out as well. I've not really seen much of my kids for the last 5 years. It is hard work.
But having these big stretches of days off, is that not pretty liberating to have 4, 5 days
well, you
off?
get 4 days, 3 days. The problem you get is that if you're finishing on late, you're getting home at 4 o'clock in the morning. So that day is...
So it's the day gone straight away.
It's you're not great. The next day, normally, you're still feeling the after effects because you've had a heavy week, long days, minimum rest, everything. Day 3, you've got yourself cumulative fatigue is a thing. And then on day 4, chances are you're going to have to drive back down because they put you on earlies, even though you ask for lates.
It's almost part of the job, isn't it? Like the days off are part of the job.
Yeah, you don't get quality time with your family, and the leave system isn't very good. I'm apparently, out of 150 captains, I was listed number 14 in the leave rankings, and I didn't get one thing I bid for. I got no leave during the summer holidays, so that was it. I just got my basic days off. I've got a bit of leave this month when the kids are back at school. So, but yeah, like today, I've come down a day early. If you're on 3 days, first day's a write-off because you're knackered. Day 2 might or might not be, and then you're driving back on day 3 because chances are you'll be back on earlies again.
Yeah.
So you don't get to see your family much.
I think it's like about your priorities and where you are in life, isn't it? Obviously with you got many kids, married, whereas some of the younger pilots might be a bit more flexible. They might not be married yet, might be single, might just be ready to travel, do long haul as well, which I guess that's a whole new layer of...
There's a few gone to Virgin. One of them I was really surprised at. Really, really good lad, really switched on. He'd had a health scare, he'd not been well, and he came back and he was about to do his command and he just up and went to Virgin, and we were like, wow, that was a real eye-opener.
Yeah.
A few years ago, a friend of mine, he'd been a captain here for a few years, and he left and went to Virgin as a first officer, and he just said, I can't do these 4 o'clock starts anymore. 5 days a week, getting up in the morning, dealing with drunks, violent passengers, this, that and the other, I just can't do it anymore. There was one of the FOs recently, I think it was last year, he got his command, really, really good lad, loved flying with him. He's got a girlfriend who lives down in London. So I thought, that's excellent, you can go down to one of the London bases and, you'll be nearer sort of thing, but they're both transferring back to Manchester. She's moving up with him, so that's, I'm pleased for him because he's got a place up here. Some guys, there's one of the girls recently, really, really good girl. She's been an FO for years. She did a command. She's got back. She's coming back in November. But some of them, you have to sit there and wait. And it's, what other industry says, oh, well, if you want to get promotion, you've got to go and live, miles away from your family. There's not many out there.
Many, no.
No. So it's difficult. There's a lot of people struggle with it.
Yeah.
A lot of people
You've got to
struggle
get a bit of luck, I think, on your side to make it work for you.
Yeah, right place, right time. I just very blessed I was.
The younger you are, though, I think the better you are to get into it, because, like you said, the more likely to have to move somewhere, more likely have to be very, very flexible with your hours and things. And obviously, when you're tied down with like obligations and family and things, then that could be a bit problematic for someone. Like if you were just to start out now, it'd be a bit of a nightmare, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a couple of FOs. They've one of them in particular. He's got a wife and a nipper. There's another one. Wife, couple of little kids. So what's happening to command? Nothing. I'm not doing it. Not doing it. I can't leave them. I'm going to stay and watch my kids grow up. And if you can afford to do that, the senior first officer, really, I reckon, is one of the best jobs out there. The Sims, a lot of it is give the captain a hard time every 6 months. You're not signing for the aircraft. You are. You've got your responsibilities, but it's not. You're paid reasonably well. It's not a bad job. It's not a bad job. When I was a senior first officer, where I was, it was fantastic. If I was on late shift, I'd go up, the shooting ground was next to the airport, I'd go up and shoot a load of clays, and if I was on earlies, when I got back, because the earlies finished early, I'd go and shoot a load of clays and go home, pick the kids up from school, you get to spend time with them, you're 20 minutes from the airport. It was fantastic. You're paid all right, especially in the northeast, where, houses are dirt cheap. It was a good little life. But now, it's a lot more difficult now.
I see a lot of pilots on like Instagram and things. You're not really on social media, are you?
Not really, no.
And always posting pictures of like sunsets and things from the flight deck. Yeah. Is that something that ever gets boring, just seeing that view? It's like
never. No, it's great. Going into Geneva is great. Flying over the Alps is great. The views you get to see are fantastic. It's not so great when you're sitting there over an overcast layer of cloud or in the tops getting bumped about for 2 hours going down to Palma or whatever. But the views you get are fantastic. It never gets boring. You never get bored of God's majesty. It's just wonderful to see every day of the week.
But you're there. I mean, even now you're doing flights that are 4-5 hours pushing. What do you do when you're in the cruise, like for 3 hours or 4 hours?
Well, pilot flying will be monitoring the aircraft, checking the instruments. Air traffic will be saying go direct to this point, so you type it in, dive direct to this point. you'll be looking for the weather, scanning the weather radar. If there's weather ahead, especially this time of year over the Adriatic and around there's loads of thunderstorms. So you'll be working out where you're going to go, picking your route around it, looking for other aircraft, flying the aircraft. Pilot not flying will be doing the flight plan, doing fuel checks, making sure you haven't got a leak, making sure you how much fuel you've got, how much time up you are, talking to air traffic control, using the nice little CPDLC interface, sending text messages, air traffic, go direct here, climb this, do that. Sometimes if you, like tomorrow Tenerife will be going down over the ocean, so we'll be using the HF radio. So the pilot not flying will be, or pilot monitoring it's called now, will be doing the HF radios. So it's busy-ish. You do get time, you have your lunch, have your tea, basically just have a chat and a catch up.
Yeah.
It's good.
Do you have time to read a book or go on a tablet or?
I don't. No, some guys. I mean, there's some guys that don't talk very much, and the first officer's a bit. They're like, oh yeah, I'm in for a dull day out with him. There was one guy. He's a good friend of mine. He took for early retirement. He was quite well known in Manchester because they went to Tenerife, and he got to the top of climb. He pulled the Screwfix catalogue. And he read it all the way to Tenerife and read it all the way back. But he's got quite an interesting sideline where he gets old World War II radios and reactivates and builds power supplies for them, and then talks to other radio hams on them. And he's got ones out of Lancaster's B-17 Sherman tanks, some Russian ones. He got one, I think it was out of a Lancaster, and he put modern FM internals in it for this mate of mine from Virgin, who I think you might be getting on soon. And he's got this radio out of a Lancaster bomber, but you can listen to all the FM radio stations on it. It's absolutely, he's a guy's a really clever bloke to do that. But yeah, he was well known for the old Screwfix catalogue one, and I thought that was quite hilarious.
Yeah. I don't know, it just seems like you have a lot of time of not doing a lot as a pilot these days. But it sounds like you are keeping busy. And
yeah, I like to know where I am. I like to know where I can go in a problem. So the best thing on an Airbus is on your map you go to nav mode, which gives you a ring with the plane in the middle, and I go 160 miles, so 80 miles behind and in front. And I look at the airports in that range because your best bet might be behind you. And I get, you print the weather off for the various airports, you get the 80s, I'll tell you what runways in use, what the weather's doing. And I'll have a series of airports that I know are workable if I've got a problem. And sometimes the cabin crew will call out, oh, well, we've got a sick passenger, we may have to divert. Right, okay, so then what I'll do is I'll find me, an airport behind and a couple ahead. So say we've got Amsterdam behind and then Dusseldorf and Munich maybe ahead. Print the weather off. In your main flight plan, I'll leave it as it is, but in the secondary I'll put in Amsterdam and a route to it, and then the next one, Dusseldorf, saying a route into that runway. And then as we leave Amsterdam, get close at Dusseldorf, I'll take Amsterdam out and I'll put the next one, say Munich, in, and I'll put that in after. So if she suddenly says, they're dying, we need to divert, press a button, we're going there. And it's all done ready. Because the last thing you want to do with a sick passenger is go, we need to get some weather. Where should we go? We need to program this. You've got to think ahead.
Yeah.
You've got to get it all set and ready to go. So I'll have it all pre-programmed. If they say there's any chance, we had an Antalya a while ago, had someone having a fit, a seizure, and there was a doctor on board dealing with them, and we were getting near Vienna, so the secondary straight away had Vienna in. And then after that, right, Ljubljana, we had that in, and then it was Zagreb, and then as we're going along, the doctor's saying, no, he's all right at the moment, but we're monitoring, and then as we get near the top of descent, someone else has a seizure in the back of the plane, and we're just about to start descent, so right, okay, speed up, we'll just get on the ground now. And they had someone a paramedic or someone looking after them. We happened to be on board, thank God. And they were looking after them, and but you keep your plan going and you keep up to date because you need to know where you're going to go. And like I said, the last thing you want to say, they say they're in a really bad way, we need to divert immediately. That's not the time to make the decision where you're going to go. That needed to be made 100 miles before. So you've got it all set ready to go.
Is that just a habit that you've got, or is that something that you're taught as a pilot to always keep in mind that something like that could happen?
I think we're all taught that, yeah. You would be a very poor pilot if you weren't on top of that. Like I said, you want to have an idea where... Most of the time, you're sitting there, fat, dumb and happy, bimbling along. You've got an idea where you're going to go. Okay, Amsterdam's all right, Dusseldorf's all right, Cologne's a bit poo, going to go here. We've got these options there. You printed the weather off. You're not going to sit there and pre-program it. Now, suddenly, if something does go quite badly wrong, serious failure, like an engine goes bang or whatever, you know where you're going to go, and as you start to descend, you can then start setting the box up, putting out mayday calls, get it all set up. But, like with a sick passenger, the chances of diverting suddenly become a lot higher. That's the time where I'll get back to you. Right, that's when you start programming it all, get it all set up, ready to go.
Yeah.
So it's there, done, ready to go.
And if there's a sick passenger, they're having like a seizure. Is it up to your call as a captain to choose what's going to happen, how to react to that? Like,
well, the cabin crew will be dealing with it. They'll give you a call and they'll let you know. Right, we've got clear briefing. It's such and such. I'm at this location. This is what's happening. This is what we're doing. We've got a doctor looking after them. We're on oxygen. Just right. Okay, keep us posted. So you write all the information down. A woman in her 50s. Suspected heart attack. Doctor's assessing her at the moment. She's on oxygen. She's all right at the moment. Okay, brilliant. So you've got that information written down ready. Because as soon as you say, I've got a medical, I need to divert, they're going to go, right, what's the problem? And you've got it there ready to go. So then they can tell the paramedics. So if I suddenly turn around and say, right, I am going into Munich, I want paramedics waiting, right, when you get them, they'll say, when you get a chance, can you give us the details? So you're doing your descent, you're flying the aircraft, navigating to a point, you've got it all set up, you could even brief it before, say, right, this is Munich, we're going to do the ILS 26, whatever, we're going to do this. Brief it all so it's already done, if it looks like you might be diverting. And then whoever's on the radio can turn around and say, right, well, yeah, this is what we've got. It's a woman in her 50s, give them all the information. And the idea is you come off the runway, you pull straight onto the closest stand possible, and there's an ambulance there waiting, they come up and take them away. But it's all about communicating and letting them know what the problem is and how to deal with it.
Some kind of issue when you're dealing with like sort of antisocial behaviour or anything with like where police or law enforcement have to get involved.
Yes, they'll want to know how many, what they're doing, and they'll gauge their response accordingly. If you just say, it's one bloke, he's a bit drunk and being a nuisance, we just want him off, fair enough. If you turn around and say, it's a stag party of 12 blokes and they're punching 7 bells out of each other, one copper's not going to turn up for that, it's going to be a lot of them. Like the other day, we were at the end of the runway, get a call, he's assaulted one of the cabin crew, we need to get him off. I'm like, right, okay, straight onto the tower. We've got a violent passenger who's assaulted one of the cabin crew, we need to get him back and stand, and we need the police as quickly as possible. Not a problem, line up on the runway, taxi down the runway, come off this point, you're going to stand such and such. And it was there done. I was really impressed with them, how quickly they did it. And as we're taxiing on the stand, there's police vans pulling up and big policemen getting off, coming to take this bloke off and have a chat with him.
It's impressive how much the cabin crew deal with though, on different, all the different sort of scenarios they could be faced, like medical or.
Yeah, I couldn't do that job for all the Team China.
I know
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. The training they go through. People think, they're just serving me a sandwich. I don't. They are highly trained. They're trained to deal with emergencies, evacuations. They're first aid trained. It's amazing on a day what they have to go through. It really is. The stuff they have to put up with some of the passengers is just I can't get my head round how people can be like that. You're in a pressurised metal tube 6 miles above the earth going along at 500 mile an hour, and some of these muppets think it's a good idea to try and open the door. That's it. The Bertha low cost opened up flying to a load of people who've never been able to do it before.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of the flights they're fine. You don't get any problems, but when you do get them, and you know which flights you're gonna have an interesting day on.
Do you have laws on a plane? Like,
You're covered by international law, aviation law.
Yeah, it's not like when you go to sea and you can start gambling and all sorts.
Yeah, I don't know about
having big parties and stuff.
I'm not sure. I'm sure one. I don't know. It was Virgin. One of the airlines years ago did have a casino on board a plane.
All right.
I can't remember where that was. It was years ago. But yeah, you're covered by airline. I use it in one of my PAs. If I've got people who are kicking off, I can't remember it off the top of my head. I've got it written down in my notes on my phone, and I use it. And it says, it is an offence. It is a criminal offence under the Air Navigation Order to be drunk on board an aircraft. And I read them the Right Act. We've got.
So it's illegal to be drunk on a plane?
Yeah, it's illegal to be drunk on an aircraft.
Oh, I don't think anyone follows that.
especially the pilots. No, it's something that you're not legally allowed to be drunk on an aircraft.
Okay.
Navigation.
Like how drunk though? Like
drunk? That's any sort of drunk.
Yeah.
You can have a couple, but you're not allowed to be.
Right. Okay.
I mean, obviously, if you're impaired to the state, sometimes you see these people walk on, they can barely walk.
Yeah.
So if there's an emergency, they can't get off that aircraft,
right,
so they don't travel.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And you've got to look at it from a safety point of view.
Yeah.
I had one of the cabin crew came on a long time ago, and he said, we've got this stag party on board. They're making these comments to me that are homophobic, and they're being generally unpleasant. I said, well, fine, we'll go back on stand and get them off. He said, oh no, it's fine. They're just not very nice. I said, you're not getting paid to put up with that. That's not acceptable. Oh, it's fine. I don't want to cause a scene. All right, let me put it like this. If we stop and we on the runway and we have an emergency, will they follow your commands? Absolutely not. I said, well, they're off. It's a safety issue. The cabin crew aren't paid to take abuse off of people. And if it's a safety issue, they're off. And we've got in our manuals a list of reasons to offload people. And whenever I do the report afterwards, I just quote it. Yeah, they didn't follow crew instructions. They were violent. They were abusive. They were drunk. They did this. They were possibly on the influence of drugs. We had recently. Someone was off their head on, it wasn't drink.
And are these actually like laws, or are they like policies that the airline enforce?
It's an airline policy,
yeah.
But it's covered by the air navigation order. Like you're not allowed to be drunk or impaired on an aircraft. So
what would happen if you did have a drink? Like, I mean, obviously you're way up in the air. Like, would you be sort of, if it was becoming a big issue, would you have to divert?
Oh, or? Yeah. If you've got someone on board who's kicking off and they're a problem, you have to divert the aircraft. In the old days, the airlines were quite good because if they diverted the aircraft, a lot of the airlines would sue the passenger for the cost of the diversion.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money to divert an aircraft and then load up a load of fuel.
Sounds very expensive.
750 quid a tonne or whatever it is, and airways fees, handling fees. It's a big cost, and they used to sue them. I did it years ago. This guy got dropped off on a remote island in the middle of nowhere. I thought it was hilarious, and it took him weeks to get home because there was no flights. There was one boat a week if he was lucky, and then they sued him as soon as he got back. And I thought that's what you need to be doing.
Yeah.
Big problem we get is people drinking their own drink. They smuggle their own drink on, and then sit there drinking. Oh, I'll have a Coke off the cart, and then they pour it in a glass and top it up with vodka or whatever. And the cabin crew spot them. Suddenly, they walked on quite happy, and next minute they're staggering to the toilet and they can barely,
Yeah.
And you've got to assess whether they're fit. And again, it comes down to a safety thing. If you have an issue, are they going to be able to get off that aircraft?
Is that something that cabin crew are like analysing? Because they always stand at the door, don't they?
Oh yeah.
Are they analysing like?
Yeah. They're watching everyone getting on. Giving you a greeting. Hello, how are you? How are you?
Yeah.
Good morning. How are you? All the nice greetings and that. But yeah, if someone comes staggering up the stairs, can barely walk, they're like, "Oh, could you just come and stand here a minute, pal? You just need to have a chat, Whoa, yeah, just round them steps and just go back up that way,
So I'm guessing all the usual Ibiza routes, Alicante maybe, they're all going to be like, I know there's going to be a bit of rowdiness on this, but then...
Yeah, Friday night Amsterdam, sometimes the Prague's going to be a little bit choice. The Antalias in the evenings are normally... The last few I've done, we've had problems.
The evenings probably, because they've had all day, haven't they, to be drinking in the terminal?
Yeah. Well, we used to get it in Newcastle in the morning. They go out in the night, they drink the night before, and they turn up at the airport 6 o'clock in the morning, being on drink all night, get in the airport, get in the bar, have another load, and then try and get on a plane. And they couldn't walk up the steps, and you're like, you didn't think this one out, did you really, But yeah, we're 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, we've had people arrested before, It's fascinating to watch.
Well, everyone else has just woke up and having a coffee and having a cereal.
Bacon butty, sitting there minding their own business, going, I'm looking forward to, putting my feet up on the beach, and suddenly there's, this bunch of these blokes can't walk up the stairs.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was quite good because we used to do training with the police at Newcastle. They used to, when it was quieter in the winter, they'd lend a plane, and the police would come on. The firearms guide would use it. They'd practice storming the aircraft, and they wanted us there. So firstly, we could see what they did, and also that we could be passengers as well. And anyone who wanted to join the firearms unit was the punch bag for the day. And I remember they had this guy who was a massive lad, and they were showing us how they get these people off, and they have it like a buzzword, a little code word that we're going to, nick this bloke now. And this guy's here effing and blinding, and they grab him and cuff him and drag him off, and then they have another scenario where the firearms guys come on, the two of them come on, storm the aircraft, and they'd have certain members of the crew who were going to be passengers who wouldn't do as they were told. They're like heads down, hands down. There was one young girl, he said, "Are you all right doing it?" Yeah, I'm fine. And this guy came on, I think he was ex-Special Bow Services, and he sort of looked at her and he just stuffed the gun in her face and just screamed in her face, like that straight away. It was hilarious. And then, they just have these different scenarios to train them, and it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
It's great fun.
Yeah.
But, we were quite pally with a lot of the police at Newcastle. They used to come and meet a lot of our flights just as a matter of course. And the sergeant, a lovely bloke called Dave, lovely bloke, he was, I said to him about the taser. I said, you ever had to use it? I've never had to use it. He said, even if they're drunk, the minute you sort of look at them, put your hand on the taser, they right that straight away, zip straight up. He said, I've never had to use it.
Yeah.
All right, good. Happy days.
Like a deterrent, isn't it? Really?
It's a very good deterrent,
Yeah.
Yeah, that not a lot of, even if you're drunk, you don't want to ride the lightning. It's good, yeah. A friend of mine had a guy tased at Manchester. Well, he didn't have him tased. The passenger got tased at Manchester. It was in the papers. He ended up naked at the bottom of the steps, and he was peeing on the steps, and he heard a noise, and he turned around and peed on the copper's boots who was standing behind him. So they just tased him. It was hilarious. There's videos of it on the internet. It's great. It's good family viewing.
Still feel a bit proud walking around the terminal building in a captain's outfit?
No, I don't. I try not to be proud.
Yeah. Do you tell people in day-to-day life if you're at like a school, parents' evening or something?
No, some of the parents at the kids' old school have actually seen. Have mentioned the video. They've seen the Fear of Flying video. One of the blokes, I have to get your autograph. Oh, no, it's not about yeah. No, I don't. I play it down. I sometimes I tell them a bus driver, which is technically true. I don't. I'm not one of these guys who bigs. Oh, look at me! I am a pilot. I am a sky god. No, I'm not. I'm just an average bloke.
At least you got like a clear-cut answer for that, just a pilot. Whereas with us, it's like, what do you do for a living? Well, we watch planes and we
get paid for it.
Yeah, get paid for it. And then they're like, what? How does that work?
It's a great job.
I don't know.
It's a great job. But no, I don't. I generally don't tell people. I try to keep it, keep it quiet.
Some pilots are the opposite, aren't they?
Yeah.
Have you got pilots or captain or anything like that in your Instagram name? Then?
No. My Instagram's just for photos I used to take when I did photography. My YouTube channel's completely unrelated to aviation whatsoever. It's just something I did to try and cheer people up during lockdown.
Yeah. Some pilots do really well on the old Instagram. There's like is it like Scotty Bateman and Captain Chris on Insta and all that, like with huge followings and
some are really good and some of them think they're really good and they get mocked mercilessly by the pilot community. It's a very fine line.
Yeah.
There's one of the FOs had a list of things to make you an arsehole captain.
Yeah.
And there were certain things. Have you got a private number plate with fly in it? And I was like, no, I've got a knackered old car. And have you got your epaulets on your big coat? No, I haven't. Have you got white flying gloves? No. Have you got this? And there was all these things. Have you got an Instagram account where you blog all the time mercilessly about your days? No, I don't.
Aviator sunglasses or something?
Yeah, no, don't. And there's certain things that that you're going to get the mick taken out if you do it.
Yeah.
And there was one lad years ago at Newcastle. He was always taking selfies, and a good mate of mine, really good lad, had just had enough of it. He wasn't doing his job. They were landing. He wasn't doing any of the setting up. He wasn't doing any of the paperwork. He was going out chatting to the cabin crew and taking selfies. And even phases of flight when you're not allowed to be taking photos, he had the phone out. And in the end, my mate just said, if that phone comes out again, I'm going to throw it out the window. I've had enough. Do your job. And this guy kept getting in trouble for this, and luckily he went off to another airline. But you come across them from time to time. Luckily, they're few and far between. But you do your job first, and self-promotion later.
Yeah, you also uphold the image of the airline, and you're like you're the top layer on the aircraft, aren't you? You're the person in charge. You can't be looking daft. You can't be looking unprofessional. You got. I think that's probably why they go all out to make sure you look official as well. You have the stripes.
Yeah.
You have the
your uniform. And, I like my uniform. I do my jacket up, try and look smart. I am the face of that airline, and when there is a delay or there's a problem, I will go to the front of the aircraft and do my speech to the passengers so they can actually see me in person. If there's a problem, I will be open and honest with them. You don't lie, because people will find out the truth. You be open and honest. You tell them why you're delayed. You tell them what's gone on. But you stand there, you stand up straight, you look down the back of the plane. I always stare at the canisters at the back, because if there's passengers pulling faces and shaking their head and sticking fingers up, I'm going to get annoyed. So I look down the cabin, I do my PA. If I've got a bit of paper, I'll bring it out and read whatever I need to read, put it back, and I'll be open and honest with them. But you are the representative of that airline, and the people look up to you, and especially nervous flyers. They want to see that you know what you're doing. So you've got to be caring, confident, and competent on every PA that you do. And I give them, big PAs, especially around Greece and Egypt. I give them all the Bible history around there, places like Cyprus, around Athens, Corinth, and Thessaloniki, Apostle Paul's travels. It makes it more interesting. Everyone said to me about 38,000 feet going at 500 mile an hour. Well, here's the history of the area you're going to visit. Santorini in 1613 BC. There was a massive volcano. And tell them some history about the place. Make it interesting.
Yeah.
And it keeps them engaged, and it makes it's better than looking out the window at cloud, isn't it?
Probably makes your life a bit more fun as well. Just a bit more varied.
Yeah, I like sitting there finding out things about. I haven't been here before. Let's find out some history and give them that. Sometimes they'll go, "Oh, thanks for the history lesson, driver." Yeah, cheers, mate. Thank you, passenger.
So you're saying it's the golden era of pilots is sort of disappearing.
Yeah.
But I would say that for the passengers, it's actually getting better because, it is a bit of a race to the bottom. Obviously the pilots obviously getting worked more and more, and they're getting less luxuries, should we say. Whereas the passengers, maybe they're not getting more luxuries, but the value for money for them is, and the competition in the different airlines is getting really, really aggressive now, isn't it? And really, you got a lot to choose from for.
Yeah, it's without a doubt. I was talking to the manager of the shooting ground the other day. I was there with my daughter teaching her to shoot, and he was saying, you get a flight for $4.99. You can go somewhere for £4.99.
It is amazing, isn't it?
It's just remarkable. You're sitting there thinking, how are they making money on that?
Yeah.
But for the passenger, the experience. I mean, especially with the new aircraft like the 350, you're going on the 380 and the 787 as well. I like the idea where the packs, the air conditioning isn't fed off the engines. Apparently, it's a nice environment. It's health-wise, it's better.
Right.
The creature comforts are low cost, short haul. You're stuffed in like sardines in uncomfortable plastic bucket seats, but you're getting somewhere for $5.
Most people don't care.
That's it, isn't it?
There's the airline jet too. I've sung a lot of praise about them, but one problem with them is their seats are so uncomfortable. But I very rarely hear anyone say that. It's just it's just a seat, and it's cheap.
And they're doing really. I mean, like I said to you earlier, the way they look after the passengers is great. I remember years ago walking into Newcastle. There's a sea of red desks. There's a sea of people dressed in red. Come this way. Can I take your bag? I'll help you. It's that extra. You're still selling the seats cheap.
Yeah.
But they're looking after people really well.
And people can go away more often as well these days. Whereas, back in the 90s, the 80s, 70s, it was a big deal, especially for a working class, middle class family.
Yeah.
Unless you were really rich, you would struggle to get away multiple times a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're that lucky.
You get people that, they have multiple holidays a year. One of the wife's friends, she searches for cheap deals on the internet, and she does vlogs and that for them. I'm not sure whether it's her main income, but she makes money out of it. But she searches for these cheap deals, cheap holidays, and suddenly, right, that's it, they're off to Bali for a week. And then they're off here, and it's cost them £300, and it's just, they just get you. I don't know how she does it. We'll have to have a chat with her.
Yeah.
But she, next thing on Facebook, I'm off to such and such, and it's got, and if you can be bothered to sit there and search, you can get some really good deals.
Yeah.
But as you said, for us, it's not so good now. It's not like it used to be for the passengers. It's fantastic.
Been amazing having you on, Mark. Thank you very much. Thank you for everything you've done on the channel.
No worries.
And the Pilot Explained series is phenomenal. I really enjoy making it with you, and the community love it as well.
So. I love doing it, mate. It's great fun.
We'll have to have you on the show again sometime.
Lovely, yeah. I look forward to it.
You don't have any socials, do you, that we can shout out? It's just Captain Mark.
That's it, yeah.
At Manchester Airport.
Yeah, not on anything. No, just come and say hello.
Yeah. He's in a remote town in Estonia or something.
Yeah, that'd be nice, yeah. Take a postcard.
Right, thank you very much.
No worries, bud. Thank you.
Cheers all. Thank you.